PSA Group and PSA Systems Integrators, good morning to you all, and I'm looking forward to today's session on social media for systems integrators. So over the next few minutes, we'll be talking about the basics or the introduction as to how we as systems integrator, how we as systems integrators leverage social media. And feel free to, with Julie helping to moderate, feel free to interject at any time. If you have any questions, you can jot them down and push them through that of GoToWebinar, or if you'd like to interject, feel free to interject as well. So I will get started, and just a little bit about myself before before we get started into the agenda, into the meat of the session. A little bit about myself and what qualifies me to have this discussion. So I'm the co-founder of Security Dealer Marketing. We've been around for just over 7 years, and I have over 19 years of marketing experience personally. But over those last 7 years with Security Dealer Marketing, we've managed marketing for over 200 dealers, systems integrators, and manufacturers all over the country. So everything that we'll be discussing today is not based on theory or I believe this will work for a systems integrator, but more along the lines of these are things that are tried and true, and things that we've experienced over the last 7 years. And I'll tell you what, there's been a lot of changes over the last 7 years, and even over the last 6 months. I mean, that hockey curve with changes and additional opportunities within social media and some challenges and things in that regard. So these will be all some of the things that we'll be discussing. And for some of you may or may not recognize what it is I'm hovering over here, but we're a featured columnist, and we've been a featured columnist. So this is Alex upside down, and this is me right side up. Since January of 2014, we've had the column Marketing Madmen. So I definitely would challenge and recommend for you to take a look at that. If you don't physically subscribe, head to sdmmag.com, take a look at the columns, and you can view the 40, 50, 60 some odd articles that we published over the last few years. So let's jump into that of the agenda. So today we'll be covering why social media, how is it important, how do we leverage this from a systems integrator standpoint? So how do we get started? And also, I alluded towards this, but is social media turning into that of a pay for play? And we'll briefly touch on that of that pay for play or advertising opportunities. And we won't be discussing all social media today, but we'll be focusing on that of Facebook and LinkedIn. So there'll be a couple of interesting things I'll be bringing up that you may or may not have been aware of, and ways for us to leverage, especially for those of us that work on that of within certain key verticals or what have you. So, and then we'll jump into Q&A, presuming time allows for that. So I don't know if any of us here have ever felt like this individual that I'm sharing here on the screen when it comes to social. You know, some of us may have had potentially background outside of the security industry, or we may have members of our team that have social media experience outside of security. You know, as much as I hate to admit this, physical security isn't necessarily as sexy as that of, let's say, a restaurant or a bar, or maybe a swimwear line, whereas social, you post 10, 15 posts a day, and we have a tremendous amount of exposure. In our particular case, sometimes we post and it's like a one-way voice, whereas we are posting and we're not getting a lot of engagement, right? And we may feel like this individual that we're sharing here on the screen. But I'll tell you what, the reason why social is important is for the following. I mean, keep in mind that according to Global Web Index, there's 170,000 internet users that were polled, and of these 170,000 internet users, they're spending on the average 1.72 hours per day on social networks. And if you really think about it, that's a tremendous amount of time, right? In addition to that, specifically with Facebook, so nearly 3 out of 4 Americans or U.S. internet users, or guess what, are on Facebook. That's a huge number, right? And I know that when we take a look at, let's just say, for example, maybe millennials or Generation Z, there may be a little bit of attrition when it comes to that of Facebook. But we take a look at, individuals in my demographic, Generation X or Boomers or what have you, which is, the lion's share of that of our customers. because we'll presume that most of us, maybe some of us, do a little bit of resi, but for all intents and purposes, most of us are going to be looking at this from the B2B perspective with commercial end users. That's going to be well represented in Facebook. And yes, I did say Facebook, but we'll jump a little more in detail as to why here in just a couple of minutes. But also with LinkedIn, whereas with 3 out of 4 Facebook users, Americans are Facebook users, nearly 1 in 3 U.S. users are that of LinkedIn users. And, I know that the election is well over, just over a year, past, but I don't know if anyone here would agree with this statement. That does anyone here think that the election was influenced by social, right? Absolutely. So I'll ask a quick question, and I know we don't have a lot of time, so I won't ask for answers unless anyone, maybe I'll give a couple of seconds here, but, does anyone, true or false, Facebook is only B2C or working with residential end users? And I'll answer that for you, and that it's false. Because remember, with Facebook, 3 out of 4 internet users are on Facebook, including that of our B2B commercial prospects. And I'll share a quick story, because this is extremely timely. So this happened earlier this week. And one of the manufacturers that we work with that only works with systems integrators and, of course, an extremely targeted segment of only 3 or 4 end user verticals. One of them happens to be the federal government. So one of the manufacturers that we work with, we didn't turn on a LinkedIn paid advertising campaign, but we turned on a Facebook advertising campaign. And I'll discuss a couple of other specifics in just a couple of minutes. But long story short is, within Facebook, in less than 24 hours after creating his advertising campaign, he generated a lead from the federal government. Not on LinkedIn, and mind you, LinkedIn has come a long way, and we'll talk about that in just a couple of minutes. But on Facebook, which is, guess what, this good old network that we leverage for that of finding friends, keeping connected with family, he generated that commercial prospect from federal government. So, why is it, transitioning into Facebook, why is it that we as users leverage Facebook, or why do we use Facebook, right? So it's for information on a personal basis. We want to connect with friends. We want to get the news or learn more about that of our personal interest. Maybe we want to generate that of all of our entertainment updates or things in that regard. And, I also want to keep in mind that Facebook is more like a coffee shop. So, as we're leveraging Facebook for business, it's just like you wouldn't walk into a coffee shop, or you wouldn't walk into tech, or to one of the local events that you happen to be networking at and say, hey, I'm David with XYZ security company, and tell me a little bit about your access control system. Tell me about your video surveillance and things in that regard. It's more along the lines of coming in, building a relationship, doing all the business development things that we're great at, right? On the other hand, with LinkedIn's very different. When we take a look at the mindset, right? We're leveraging LinkedIn to maintain our professional identity. We want to leverage that of the contacts that we have, and also create new contacts. We may be potentially searching for opportunities, whether it may be career-wise. We may want to look for an additional career, or maybe we want to leverage some of those opportunities. We want to stay in touch. I don't know how many times, I'm not sure if any of us that are here on the webinar is a rhetorical statement, but I build relationships on LinkedIn with individuals, and then when I meet them at a conference, because they happen to be in a different state, I feel as if I already know them, and it's like I have a relationship, and that's an opportunity that can be done both on LinkedIn as well as on Facebook. So it's an opportunity, of course, to stay up to date for that of our careers with learning information. Because remember, in the content that we're publishing, and we'll jump into more detail about this in just a couple of minutes, social media is an opportunity for us to position ourselves as the thought leader. Remember, our customers, the end users that we work with, they rely on us to be their security liaison. They don't go to the PSA Techs of the world to enrich that of their knowledge. They don't go to the ISC shows and things in that regard. So we come into play. We have all the continuing education to make sure that we are keeping their systems up to speed, as well as educating them on the latest and greatest and all that good stuff. So we talk into or transitioning as to how we get started, right? So keep in mind, first things first is we have to have a professional presence for that of our company. And I won't pick on anyone that's here on this call, but there are SDM top 100 systems integrators that do this wrong. And I'm not talking about the SDM top, I'm not talking about 90 through 100. I'm talking about within the top 20. And there's at least one, if not a few, that are doing this wrong, right? And I won't name names. But, and mind you, this is more than Facebook and LinkedIn. Sure, there's Twitter and there's other social platforms. But we've got to create a company page. This can be done for free. And also, these are all traditionally going to be controlled by that of a personal profile. So it will require a personal Facebook and require a personal LinkedIn company profile that you'll leverage that profile to create that of your company page. And mind you, and I'm not sure if someone has a question or if just there's a little bit of background, but I'll just continue. So keep in mind that, once again, your personal profile is different from that of your company page, but it's powered by your profile. And there may be someone that's on the call, I'm not sure who. You may want to mute yourself if there's some background noise, but I'll continue. No, no problem. Care of it, David. Oh, I appreciate that. Thanks, Julie. So the one thing is you want to make sure that we're filling out our company profile completely. And I know it goes without saying, but we want to ensure that we have consistent branding with all of your assets, right? With your website, with any of your print collateral, with your business cards, all of these good things. We don't ever want it to appear as if you're a different company based on whether I'm looking at you from what it is that you're communicating about yourself, whether I'm having a one-on-one conversation, whether it's your website, whether it's that of your print collateral or what have you. And when we take a look at that of your social content, right, we don't want it, remember I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, we don't want for it to be that of just a one-way voice, right? So we want for it to entertain, want for it to inspire, want it to start a conversation. Maybe we ask a question. We also want to teach how to do something, right? For those of us that, mind you, when we take a look at, and we won't get into a ton of examples right now, but keep in mind, when we take a look at the service-related things that are coming into play, what's happening is we want to, there's going to be a lot of the usual suspects as far as questions that are asked. And this is where we can teach how to do something or talk about how our systems or solutions can be integrated so that they can be controlled from one interface or things in that regard, right? And let's close this. And when we take a look at the posts that we're submitting on that of the various social platforms, there should be a mix of, not just educational-based content, not just offers or promotions, but also we want to have things light and humor-based. And let me just quickly share an example of that of a quick video that, and I know that we're not going to have, there's really not audio here, but I'll play this, and I'm sorry for it being grainy because clearly a PSA systems integrator did not install this, but here's for your, I'll go ahead and just play this. So there may be a slight delay, but, and I know that I believe everyone's on mute, but I mean, this is a funny example of sharing content because, mind you, not that the newspapers these days are doing very well, but the whole point here is we as consumers of content don't want to just be reading through the mundane. I mean, clearly what we do protecting people and property is incredibly serious and it's all about risk management, and I get that. But if you take a look at the article that we have marketing, or the column that we have Marketing Madmen, there's usually typically a little bit of humor that's based in there. And usually at the events that we go to, we always have a few new individuals that come up to us and appreciate the humor because it's different from that of all the other serious content that's within the magazine. The other thing to keep in mind is, this example that I'm showing you, because remember, we manage marketing for systems integrators all over the country, using and leveraging an example of a funny video or like the silly burglar of the month. Something like this is something that performs incredibly well. And one of the trends that we see is in the first few months, the silly burglar of the month is something that is clicked on more so than, let's just say, like a featured content article, which is really what we want for the users to read, because that is reinforcing our brand, reinforcing what it is that we want them to know about us, which is the fact that we're the, we're the security liaison, we're the thought leader. But what we tend to notice is within the first few months, the engagement increases because of this. But usually after that third or fourth or fifth month, ironically, the video, the silly burglar of the month, that engagement lowers, but the engagement to what's important, which is that content-rich article that's usually would be created or synonymous with like an e-newsletter, that goes up and it continues to stay up. So this is a propeller or a driver for that. So when we take a look at, and I covered a few of these things already, but what I want to point out as far as some of the types of content that we share or the ways that we leverage things, they're like, let's talk about events, right? Some of us may or may not do webinars or live events or lunch and learns. These are the types of things that we want to make sure that we're promoting them in advance. And we don't just want to talk about the 5 tips of, if we're just only doing educational content, the reality is, guess what's going to happen? You're going to have one-way voice. You're not going to have any engagement. But if we have fun, personal things that are very light, because social is meant to be light, this is something that will be incredibly helpful. So to increase that of the engagement. And I won't go live right now, but Facebook Live and hopefully LinkedIn will continue to get its act together so that LinkedIn will have this capability as well. But leveraging Facebook Live, which allows for you to essentially broadcast live, like as if you were a broadcaster, anyone that is connected to your page and they're logged into their app will get a notification. And there's a simple app that will just a couple of clicks of the button will allow you to go live to be able to broadcast to that of all of your Facebook fans. So when I talked a little earlier about social turning into a pay-for-play, what I meant by that is in the good old days, like 2, 3, 4 years ago, a high percentage, whenever you would post, let's say you have 100 or 500 or 1,000 or 10,000 followers to your Facebook or to your LinkedIn, what happened was a high percentage of them would receive the content that you push. Well, now what's happening is that a very, very small percentage, and in some cases as low as 1 to 5% of individuals that are connected to your Facebook page would actually reach your existing content. Because that of Facebook, its algorithm is continually changing, and Facebook is looking to generate revenue, right? Like all of the other social platforms. The good news is, with Facebook as an example, because you can target, because remember, 3 out of 4 users are on Facebook, and we can target exactly who we want to target, you can boost things for as little as $10. And a couple of quick quotes from Michael Stelzner, the founder and CEO of Social Media Examiner. So social is speeding towards a pay-if-you-want-to-play model. With the introduction of algorithms across most major social networks, it's very hard for businesses to stand out without bringing money to the table. And Ann Hadley, who's the Chief Content Officer for Marketing Profs, states, social networks increasingly have become publishing platforms, which means the age of free social comes to a close for all but the lucky viral few. We take a look at like your advertising strategy, right? You always have to make sure that you have your end in mind. So we've got to define what our goals are. Are we looking to develop awareness? Are we looking to generate more leads? Are we looking to do a little bit of both? Do we want to promote some events? Do we want to promote a particular new solution offering that we're doing? Do we want to promote to our existing base, to our prospective base? These are all goals and things that we want to take into consideration, right? Who's our audience? Do we happen to focus on certain key commercial segments, i.e., critical infrastructure, healthcare, manufacturing? Because the needs of all these, educational, all of these niche vertical markets have different needs, right? And whom it is that we need to market to is very different. Same thing holds true with Resi, right? We also want to make sure that we're leveraging the correct social platforms based on the types of users that we work with. And according to Social Bakers, groups that spend money in advertising today, 9 out of 10 spend money on Facebook, 1 out of 3 in YouTube, just 1 in 4 in LinkedIn, and just under 1 in 4 on Twitter. So this is representing that of who it is that spends money on the platforms that are used for advertisers of social media. And a quick quote from, and frankly, I hope I'm not plagiarizing this from someone else, but I say this all the time, Facebook knows more about us than out of our spouses or significant others. And that is 110% the truth, right? So, and how is that the case, or why is that the case, right? Keep in mind, we are always logged in, and we typically don't ever log out, right? Because I get asked all the time, well, Dave, you keep talking about Facebook, but I don't use my business email on Facebook. How are you going to find me? Well, guess what? I don't know this to be a fact, but I'm fairly for certain. Just because you use abc@gmail.com and your business email address is, abc@mysecurity.com, guess what? Facebook knows most know more about us than that of, our spouses or significant others. We don't log out, and Facebook knows all of our email addresses, just like that of all the other social platforms. A quick funny little story as well, and I'll move on, is, we of course have run many campaigns simultaneously with LinkedIn and with Facebook. And ironically, we uploaded that exact same database. We've done this numerous times. But I remember the first time that we did this, I expected to have more of a take rate with LinkedIn than that of with Facebook. And what I mean by that specifically is, and I'm going to get to that in a couple of minutes, but I'm bringing this up now. But you're able to upload your database to social platforms, and that can be a custom audience that we market to, right? But just finishing this up and moving on to that, finishing up that story, I'm sorry. The take rate for Facebook was about 20% more than that of LinkedIn, believe it or not. And I was floored. I would have thought it would have been the other way around. But Facebook knows more about us just because of everything that we do as far as the engagement, as well as the fact that we're always logged in. And Facebook even knows what we buy. And not just on Facebook, but when we're off of Facebook, right? Because there's Google Analytics and there's Facebook Analytics. And Facebook Analytics is starting to become more and more mainstream on more and more websites. So I had talked about this briefly, and I'll expand upon this, but when we talk about what's referred to as retargeting, website retargeting, or retargeting based on a list, you may not be familiar with it by name, but website retargeting is simply, we as a user, any user that goes to your website, keep in mind a very small percentage of them are going to be physically filling out a form or picking up the phone. And long story short is, when someone doesn't do that and they don't engage with you, we want to follow them all over the internet. Clearly, we're not the residential one-call close. Our sales cycle can be months, right? And in some cases, even years. So if we can follow and stay top of mind and make sure that we're, once again, on the top of mind, this is one of the ways that we want to retarget. And you can leverage that across Google's ad platform. You can leverage that on Facebook as well as LinkedIn's ad platform. But in addition to that, by contact, as I mentioned earlier, you can upload your database of prospects. And mind you, if you sell by vertical, don't do a general audience, because what's important to education is not important to manufacturing or vice versa, because ultimately you can have specific ads that are geared towards that of these groups, right? And even if you have small pockets or small advertising groups, you want to have them segmented. But ultimately, the context that you upload that are associated with the profile, that can be a custom audience that you market to. With LinkedIn, they take things even a step further. Let's say you don't have the email address, but let's say that you do national accounts by national retail as an example. You can upload all of the entire list of companies that you work with, and you can say, of these companies all throughout the country, I want to target titles A, B, C, and D, and that can be a custom audience that you market to on LinkedIn. So one other quick thing, and I know we're wrapping things up here in just a couple of minutes, but lead ads. So the first time that I actually talked about lead ads, and I won't be able to talk about it too much in detail right now, but was at Tech. This is not something that I really make public, because this is usually something that I only keep reserved for that of our existing customer base. But lead ads, so long story short is, you're able to generate leads on both LinkedIn and Facebook. And historically, this has only been allowable on Facebook, but LinkedIn, within the last 12 months, has finally got their act together with this. And what this allows for is, mind you, when we're on Facebook or we're on LinkedIn, we typically are going to be on our phone, and there's a feed that we go through. And usually, whenever there's a sponsored or promoted post, you click through and you go to your website, to a landing page to learn more, or download an ebook or a white paper, or case study, or what have you. But in this particular case, we can physically have the targeting or the ad option as being to generate leads. And all in all, we can, if we have a compelling enough offer, whether it's, hey, download this and give me your information and I'll allow you to download this, or let's say we have some kind of offer, we have the capability of generating leads on that of social platforms for that of, on that of Facebook and LinkedIn without the user even having to go on the website. And at the beginning of today's session, I used a prime example of a manufacturer of, it just happened to be the perfect, it's like hard luck and activity provides good luck. And in this particular case, because I spoke with our customer about this, and he stated, yeah, Dave, it just so happened that this individual, the end user, which was in the federal government, happened to be in his bed, ready to go to sleep, surfing through Facebook, and all of a sudden his ad popped up, and it was like, wow, I've just been researching this recently, and he was looking at an alternative, but he wasn't super gung-ho on the alternative, and it was just like perfect timing, and he clicked on a button, filled out his information, and voila, that lead came through. And clearly there's the sales cycle, of course, but these same things can be applied for us as well. So just wrapping things up with a couple of things. When we take a look at, let's just say, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and, the reality is we don't have time to physically be managing all of these things, or maybe we even use other social platforms as well. What we can do is there are tools that will allow you to post content. So let's just say, for example, maybe I want to spend, an hour a month, but I only want to do this once a month. And you can post and schedule things into all of your social platforms by leveraging social media tools. So, I'm using that of Hootsuite. I'm using this as an example. They have a free and a paid plan that starts with as little as $10 a month. There's also a company by the name of Social Pilot that you can reference as well. You can jot that down. That has very low cost offerings, and you can connect all of your social platforms on a one-time basis, and you can calendar things out so that you're not having to manually post to Twitter, to LinkedIn, to Facebook, and you have to do this every single time. You can literally schedule it once, and it'll deploy across all social platforms. You can even have them staggered so that you don't have them go at the same time and all that good stuff. And it's very, very inexpensive because time is our worst enemy. We don't have, time. We don't have enough time in the day. So, just a couple of quick review and takeaways from today. We talked about why social, right? Our users, our prospects, our existing customers there. How do we get started? Well, we got to make sure we have we've got to make sure that we have that of a company page, and we've got to make sure that we have it so that it's branded and the messaging is consistent with that of all of our other marketing. We talked a little bit about social turning into that of a pay-for-play. We briefly touched on how social advertising works and some of the unique capabilities. The one thing I'll leave you with is, hey, let's get started, right? Rome was not built in one day. Some of us that are listening to this live and that may be listening to this on the recording, we may already be conducting this. Some of us may not be conducting this. And I'll say, don't get discouraged and don't expect for a tremendous amount of engagement out of the gate. And mind you, when you have images of your team, of your staff, you're going to get more engagement there than that of like a lot of the educational based content. And that's just the way it is, right? One thing that you want to do is you want to stick with it and always remember that methodical and steady wins the race. So, with that said, I'm not sure, Julie, if there's any questions.
I'm not sure. We'll open it up to the team. I'm unmuting those that I muted. Did anybody have any questions for David?
And I'll start off with one question that I always get asked. I briefly touched on this, but keep in mind, right? I know I touched a lot on Facebook and a little bit of LinkedIn. And, I usually get asked like the following, which is, hey, Dave, I work within the federal government, or my end users are in the federal government niche, or I work with manufacturers. I work only with CSOs or with facility managers or IT professionals, things in that regard. Dave, you know what? They're not on Facebook. So, I respect what you're saying because, of your credentials, but what gives, right? And here's the thing, right? You would be surprised. We run, of course, marketing for ourselves, and we run marketing for that of our customers here in the physical security industry. And remember, we're not going to get 100% penetration rate. But let's just say there's realistically in one particular vertical that you focus on, there's a niche. In one particular niche vertical, let's say there's 1,000 prospects. Even if we're only able to get access to 500 of them, that's a huge opportunity. And it's not a waste because ultimately we want to have two different kinds of campaigns that are running simultaneously. I didn't cover that in detail, but we want to have like a brand awareness that is just educational, that is not even that has zero call to action in it almost. And I don't mean to be so extreme with that, but the point being there is we want to always give before we should look to receive. And mind you, there's not, as we know, for the typical commercial end users that we work with, it's not as if they're transitioning service providers like hotcakes, right? There's a long sales cycle. And the whole point is, ideally, as we embark on this organic as well as the advertising social, we want to make sure that we have enough early adopters to help support morally as well as financially that of the expenditures that we're doing for this. But the tipping point that we're looking to get to is we want for in each of the verticals, whether you do national accounts or you're within a 50-mile radius of your location, we want to ensure that everyone knows who you are and they respect who you are and they believe that you can help them whether they need you now or not. And once we get to that tipping point, you'll have more and more business and prospects that you can handle, so that you're not having to just rely on cold calling and networking and self-generating leads. I know we didn't talk about social selling today with like a LinkedIn or with social networks. That may be a good topic for a future discussion or digging deeper into some of the things that I touched on today. But there are huge opportunities. And as I mentioned in the previous slide, I implore everyone to learn more about this, right? I know we may not have a lot of questions on today's session, but definitely feel free to reach out. And I'm happy to share with you some more specifics relative to what the applications are and how you can get the most bang for your buck as far as your in-house team is concerned, and give some friendly advice and things in that regard. So I'm not sure if anyone else has any other questions, but that's usually one that comes up.
Hey, Dave, I have a question. So you were talking about Facebook Live and creating these accounts for a business, whether it be Facebook or LinkedIn. What is your recommendation on the frequency of posts to go on to a business social media account?
That's an excellent question. So if you'll remember a few minutes ago, I talked jokingly about like a bar or let's say like a swimsuit line, right? More that's going to be more of a Facebook Instagram as opposed to like a Facebook LinkedIn. And in that particular regard, we need to have several posts per day, right? Maybe on Facebook, one or two per day, but on Instagram, you would have multiple, a half dozen to even a dozen. And guess what? Every single one of those posts are going to have, depending upon the number of followers, half a dozen to dozens to even hundreds of engagements in the form of like, comment, share. Now, transitioning to answering your question, in our industry, things are very different, right? So it's not just about the frequency of what it is that we're doing, because it's about the ratio of different types of posts. So number one, we're going to want to have, I would say at a minimum, 3 to 5 posts per month, right? But I don't just mean, hey, here's the 5 tips for getting the most out of your access control system, or video beyond surveillance, right? Just as a caption to get your attention. You're going to want to have that meat, so to speak, because that's what's going to help to continue to solidify the security liaisons that we are, right? But in addition to this, what we want to do is we want to personalize our business. And this is where we want to do a few things. Number one, we are, especially for those of us that are in the community, for the community, and we work with a local service area, what we want to do is we should be following local law enforcement agencies. Because clearly a local law enforcement agency is not able to endorse us. However, what they are able to do is we're able to follow them, and if they post something that makes sense, we can share it, and chances are they're going to like it. So that is like a subliminally, an indirect endorsement of us, right? In addition to this, let's just say, a lot of the things that I see, for example, on LinkedIn, is there are a lot of jobs that are horrible as far as how they look with all of the wiring and the Cat5 cables and things in that regard. Whereas it's like it looks like just a hodgepodge of spaghetti, whatever the color of the cable happens to be, and the wiring. But then ultimately, let's just say, like for example, as a PSA integrator finishes that job, on the other hand, if we have those before and after pictures, and we have, of course, don't forget to make sure you have your proper authorship credit, so it doesn't ever get asked, hey, is that stock or is that real? Because you want to make sure you have your decal that is, your that of your business. So you show the before and after, or maybe that of, let's say we have a team building event, or let's just say that you're washing your vehicles, or you happen to be doing education in-house with that of your tech team. These are all the kinds of things, or maybe you happen to be at a networking event, or you're at ISC West, or you're at PSA Tech. These are all things that we want to take pictures of and document them on your social. So to answer your question, Julie, I mean, generally speaking, we should have a minimum of 3 to 5, and I don't want to discourage you to say we shouldn't have more than 5, but the reality is, ideally, we're having that minimum number. We don't necessarily need to have a dozen posts per day, because that's going to go on like deaf ears. And, we'll leave it up to you as to like the exact number, but ideally you're having a minimum of 3 to 5 per month.
Okay.
With a good mix. And then you also brought up like Facebook Live as an example. So remember, with Facebook Live, literally on my phone, you literally can download an app. And as you download that app, you click on a button, and I'm not going to go live right now, but you literally click on a button that says live, and you add a description as to what this is. You hit the button that says start live video, and all of a sudden you're live, and every single individual, because remember I mentioned a few minutes ago that only 5 to 10%, and in some cases even less than 5% of your Facebook fans, we happen to have I think 600, 700, 800 followers of our Facebook page. Every single one of them that happens to be logged into their app will get a notification saying Security Dealer Marketing is live, here's the description, and you can literally click a button and engage with that, right? So definitely, would encourage things in that regard. That's an opportunity, and I'll tell you one thing. For those of us, remember I finished with get started, methodical and steady marketing wins the race. Keep in mind that your competitors are not doing this. And keep in mind, we are not the JCIs of the world. We're not the Tycos. We're not the ADTs of the world, right? We are all about that personalized service, that personalized attention, that consulting, building custom solutions. So the things that I'm talking about today are allowing us to flex our muscles, so to speak, and to be able to amplify and to communicate that. Because if we're the best kept secret and no one knows about it, well then it's just like the old adage of, does a tree in the forest make a sound if no one's there, right? So anyhow, not sure if there's any other questions, and I know we may be running up on time, but I really, really appreciate this opportunity. And if anyone has any follow-up questions after the fact, I'm all ears in any way that we can help.
Awesome. I think this was a great presentation. Did anybody else have any other questions or comments? Awesome. Thank you so much, David. Really appreciate you jumping on today and providing this presentation for us.
You're very, very welcome. Everyone have a wonderful day, and look forward to the next one.
Absolutely. Thanks, Dave.
Great. Thank you so much. All right. Bye-bye.